Today, I want to talk about the state reopening plans and a contrast between Pennsylvania, where I live, and Florida. I see Pennsylvania as authoritarian in its approach to this reopening the economy. In Florida, they seem to be taking a more what I would call engaged approach. I want to talk about the difference, be where that's coming from. Tom Wolf had a press conference today, which I did not watch, but here is a short article out of triblive.com. In Pennsylvania, we have a groundswell of county leaders, government officials in the counties opposing the governor's policy, his hesitation to allow the economy to turn back on. We've seen business owners. There's a large movement, protest movement going on. There have been lawsuits that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania has struck down. Every step of the way, it seems like Tom Wolf responds not with any sort of empathy for any of these folks, but with authority, with threats. And Monday here, today on May 11th, no different. So here's what the article says. Governor Tom Wolf on Monday had strong words for politicians and business owners who choose to defy the state's coronavirus restrictions, threatening their funding and business licenses as some counties move to the state's yellow phase of reopening and others remain in their most restrictive phase. Wolf said funding to help counties in the fight against the coronavirus pandemic, which he likened to a war that some are deserting, will be used to support those that are following the orders meant to stop the spread of COVID-19. Funding from the Federal CARES Act that is federally designated for certain places and healthcare facilities will still go to those places. He doesn't have a choice, okay? Yeah, great. So he's saying the money that's designated by the federal government for healthcare facilities and whatnot will go to them. He said, but discretionary funds will go to areas that continue to follow the state's restrictions. Here's a quote from the governor. We can't afford to have people desert. And so the reward for desertion cannot be that you're just like everybody else and you get the discretionary funding. Discretionary funding will go to those places that are doing everything they ought to do to keep their citizens safe. So money that's given out to fill need, desperate need, whether it's discretionary or not, in a time of a national crisis, a pandemic, a health crisis, and an economic crisis. So the federal government is giving money to the states. Here is the governor of Pennsylvania saying, based on their opinions, based on their disagreement with the governor's policy, he's not going to give them those funds. Now he's talking to business owners. These politicians put you at risk of losing your health department certification. They put you business owners at risk of losing your liquor license. They put you at risk of losing your certificate of occupancy. That the decision to open a business prematurely is not only morally wrong, they put you at risk of losing your certificate of occupancy. So everything that the governor gives to citizens, okay, individual citizens, small business owners, he is threatening to revoke if they don't follow his guidelines. And this isn't a quote. This is just a narrative from the newspaper. Business owners who go against restrictions will risk their liability coverage. State Insurance Commissioner Jessica Altman said in a statement that many policies exclude coverage of businesses or people engaging in illegal acts or conduct. So they're going to do everything that they can to harm business owners who, for various reasons, want to open their business in defiance of some of their restrictions. So that's one approach. That's what I'm calling the authoritarian approach. In Florida, the protest movement has been very small. The relative apparent support for the government program, I guess you could assume then, is very high. So what is Ron DeSantis doing differently? Well, he made sure that now South Florida, the hotspots are still very restrictive. The rest of Florida, when he did open, he made sure that Things that opened are something that every citizen will notice. It will affect every citizen in a positive way. There's an article in USA Today dated April 2nd, so it's a little dated now. Things that happened in the past is what brought us to where we are today. So that's why I think even though it's dated, it's a good resource. It may be more so. And what I mean by that, people's public opinion towards their governors. They talk about the police here. One of the cases they cite is from Florida. It's the pastor who defied restrictions and had a church service with 400 or 500 people, and he was arrested. There's commentary from the police here that how much they pretty much begged and pleaded with this guy not to do it, that they didn't want to arrest him. But there was other people protest that this was an infringement on religious freedom, that it was unconstitutional. There's a point in this article where they talk about Florida governor and Texas governor. Churches are going to draw even more law enforcement scrutiny coming into Easter, but policing of gatherings may have been made more difficult this week when some state officials, including Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, declared religious services as essential activities. Abbott, the Texas governor, also has left the door open to religious services. And here's a quote from Governor Abbott of Texas. If religious services cannot be conducted from home or through remote services, they should be conducted consistent with the guidelines from the president and the CDC by practicing good hygiene, environmental cleanliness and sanitation, and by implementing social distancing to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And that's in the Texas guidelines. So Texas and Florida acquiesced, if you will, compromised somewhat in the church issue. Some would say, wow, they're Republicans, it's political, they had to do what the pressure made them do. Well, maybe, but I think that there is something else going on here. I bring the business leadership, leading small teams, large teams, multi-departments. That's sort of my background. In business, if you go back 50, 60 years, management was more authoritative. We hold the authority. You want the job. You do what we tell you. We don't answer to anybody. Just do what we say. Everyone would agree that now that's draconian, unacceptable, and it's bad leadership. So what do businesses do now? Businesses try to get everybody involved. They try to equip their employees and inform their employees to make the right decisions on their own. There are public metrics. And the important thing about metrics is they have to be something that are meaningful, that the people understand, and that they can see how they have influence over the metrics. If you do that and you post them prominently, then people's behavior will tend towards support of that because it makes them feel involved. It makes them feel motivated to make it. They feel like they make a difference. They feel like, and they have to be heard. There's also this culture of feedback, and the systems are designed with input from employees. That's how you get a workforce to support you and to work through difficult situations, adapting and whatever is necessary. The more informed that they are and the more equipped that they are and the more empowered they feel that they have an influence over things, the more supportive and the more effective that workforce is. That's not what the governor of Pennsylvania is doing. The governor of Pennsylvania is saying, I'm in charge, you do what I tell you, and if you don't, then you're a bad person, they're bad people, and we will punish you. That's simply it. Some may look at what they did in Florida and Texas. If you're in an extreme position, you say, whoa, that's really scary. They're going to let these religious nuts do all this and spread the disease, and that's really bad. Well, we live in a free society. This is not China. Authoritarianism doesn't work. We can't force people to comply. The more, just like in a workforce, the more you force an unwilling person to comply, the more they look for ways to defy you, to not comply publicly or otherwise. When they do what you want them to do, it's only when your eyes upon them. It's the minimum to get by. The power of the government to lock and shut down business has always been limited in the United States. I think we get one bite at the apple. You can't go back. Once we reopen this, people will not comply. Knowing that there is a second wave coming, you need to have the people voluntarily doing what you want them to do. That's what a leader does. So you may have to concede on a few points, and you do sort of a value cost benefit analysis, a risk analysis. And you say, to set the tone for the people of Florida or the people of Texas, to get them to buy in and not look at me as a tyrant, I will concede on this thing with the churches. I will do it in a way that's reasonable and safe. I will say if they can do all these other things in practice and they have no other option, then we may just have to let them hold their church services. How many churches are incapable of doing the online services? They're all very small if they're out there. And the smaller they are, the more likely they are to be able to implement effective masks and social distancing and sanitizing and all of that. So what's the real risk? If you get them to do what you want them to do, the risk, the exposure to something like that is minimum. Now, yes, you're going to have some extremists. You're going to, trust me, I know there are some extremists who's going to make this a biblical issue, that we have to open and we have to defy no matter what you do. But you can't play to the worst. It's like being in a job, working for a company who every time they have the worst abusers within the company, they tighten the rules on everyone else. They tighten the rules on everyone else. Have you ever been in that environment? Nobody wants to be in that environment. So what's happening in Pennsylvania is Tom Wolf's authoritarian approach to this problem is guaranteeing that if we have a second wave, people will not do what he wants them to do. In Florida, if the people are trusting of the governor and they feel like they matter, you can say these are fringe people. But the more ammo you give a fringe, the larger that fringe grows. So yes, there's always going to be an extreme fringe group that you're not going to make happy. But when your actions confirm what the fringe is telling you, gives them ammo to attack you and characterize you in this way, then the fringe grows. They gain popular support. I mean, they know this. I mean, he's a politician. He should know this. What it comes down to, I believe, is the fundamental difference between right, left, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat. We could talk about all these other issues, but if you really boil it down and you're fair to both sides, the left, liberal, Democrat side of the country looks to government to provide safety nets, health, comfort, solve problems. So the left, liberal, is more sort of a collectivist thing. They believe that we need government to keep the collective on track and to help us make everybody better. The right, conservative Republicans, believe that individual liberty and freedom is more important. They believe that the collective is really only as strong as the individual who have freedom and liberty in middle. The Republican, the conservatives are more focused on individual liberties. They don't want the government involved in all these things. They think that the best thing to do is for the government to empower the people to stay out of our lives. They believe that that's where more prosperity. Both sides, good-hearted people that believe that they want to see more prosperity in the United States, less suffering, more prosperity. It's totally false to say that the left only cares about that and the right is selfish and doesn't care. That's just an attack from the left. It's the reality that the people on the right believe that their individual freedoms, they don't feel like the government's ever going to make things better for them, that they're better equipped to do things on their own. It's about the role of government. That's the main issue here, the scope and the role of government. Here's an interesting thing. Which group is pro-law enforcement? Which group is always behind the police? The right, aren't they? Why, though? When the issue is criminal, enforcing criminal law, the right is behind the police. Here we have a case where the law enforcement is being used to enforce government policies that are trying to control the individual, take away individual rights in favor of the greater good, the collective. So suddenly the left are behind the police and the right are not. Again, it's not inconsistent because the issue is the role of government. That's what's happening, I believe. It's not all a Democrat-Republican thing. It's more Democrats are leaning towards this public safety, authoritarian control, and more of the Republican governors are more liberal. Is that interesting? More liberal in terms of opening up the economy. The important thing here, if you're a good leader, you know that it's very important to have the support of the people. Even if you compromise the ideal situation, you surrender control, which creates situations that are not ideal for public health, but in the bigger picture are more effective if people support you. If you do it properly, if there's a coming need to tighten up the restrictions, the people will see the numbers, they'll be already a part of it, they'll expect it when it happens, and if you implement it in an empathetic, fair way, they'll do it. But if they think it's like a king sitting in some room with people and they're making the decisions and we don't know why, and one day they fire off an edict saying we're going to close business again, people are not going to obey that. They're not going to comply. They're going to do the opposite. They're going to rebel. How about acknowledging the fact that you can't force and control people? You can't force compliance on something like this, on taking away freedoms. That's a reality. If you're a manager, if you're a leader, you need to accept that reality. And when you put plans in motion and when you set policy, you have to build your policies accepting that I am not going to force people because I can't. I am not going to try and control people because I can't. And by trying to do that, I am only going to make things worse. I am only going to shoot myself in the foot. What my real goal is to get through this problem with minimal damage to the economy and minimal public health crisis. Then I need people to get behind me. I need to get people to do the right thing because that's how it works here in the United States of America. You can't be a purist. You can't be I'm going to tightly control this opening up, and then we're going to pull it back. Tom Wolfe has said, it's not a one-way street. We can go back. And it just came off with this whole tone of threat. Oh, we're going to let you have a little freedom, but, we're going to pull that right back if we have to. That's not how you do things. You say, look, we have a problem. We are hurting financially. We are hurting from a health standpoint. This is very, very difficult. We all need to come together, and we need to work through this. It's frustrating for me to see this because there was a time, there was a campaigning season. There was an election time. Once the elections were over, it was time to work. It was time to work for the people, not the party, for the people. Sure, there was always an edge of politics around it. Now, it's always like there's an election 1 month away. So every decision, every policy, everything is always like an election. It's always politics. And it feels like nobody's trying to serve the American people. If you're a Democrat governor, you're supposed to serve Democrats and Republicans. And if you're a Republican, you're supposed to serve Democrats and Republicans. I'm not saying you compromise your principles. I'm not saying you get everybody to agree with you in everything you're doing, but this is a national crisis. This is everybody. This isn't an issue of opinion or political side. This is everybody. Politics doesn't work. I don't know if Tom Wolfe can reverse this. Once you're so far down the road with something like this, I don't know if he can recover. It's like when police are trained and they don't always perform well, but they're trained to not escalate things unnecessarily, trying to be in control. Yes, police have to exercise their authority and be in control of serious situations, but they're supposed to use judgment, and sometimes they may actually compromise on the law, compromise the perfection of the law to prevent from escalating a situation to make it into something much worse. Tom Wolfe has escalated this war. He used the rhetoric of a war and defection. How do you come back from that? How do you now moderate and get all the people that you just called the enemy and all the people that you just threatened with every way you could to ruin their business and ruin their lives financially? How do you now suddenly win their trust? How do you now suddenly become their leader? I don't know if you can. I don't know if there's going to be a second wave. And if there is a second wave, I don't know how serious this virus is anymore. But if there's a need to pull back, I think you'll see places like Florida and Texas rallying together like you would want Americans to rally together and pull back and make the common sacrifice to try to get this problem under control. You're not going to see that in Pennsylvania, in these other authoritarian states. The more you try to pull back now, the harder these people are going to fight and the larger their numbers are going to become. Short of people dying in the streets, which I don't think we're going to see with this virus, short of people just dropping over sick in the grocery store in front of us in mass numbers, short of something like that, I don't think the people are going to rally behind the government. I think they're going to rebel more and more and more. It's not going to matter how many businesses you have closed. When you have hundreds and thousands of people joining together in protest without any sort of distancing or masking or anything like that, it's going to spread. That's you, Governor. Okay? That's not those crazy right-wing people. You're responsible. That's a part of your job. Whether you agree with it, like it, or not, your job is to manage that. You're responsible for the outcome. That's another thing that gets really tiring, is politicians that are elected officials who never take responsibility for the outcomes. They always go, well, it's not my fault because they wouldn't approve it. They wouldn't let me do it. How much of us in our own jobs, in our own lives, get everything that we want? But yet we have to live with the outcomes of our decisions and our actions. So that's my prediction. If there's a second wave, you're going to see the authority, and yeah, the press will probably be behind it. Everybody will say, look, these are the states where there was all these protests and all this rebellion, and look, they're the ones that are rebounding the worst, and now they can't control it. They're going to blame those people, and it's not. It's not. It's the governor's fault. It's the leadership that set this up. I hope I'm wrong. I hope there's not a rebound, or if there is, I hope the people get behind it. There's a large and growing even larger by the day. When you read articles like you just read today and Monday, that's just fuel to the fire. Keep escalating, Wolf. Just keep escalating the rhetoric. Keep attacking like they're the enemy, like these constituents of yours, the people you're duty bound to protect their interests. Just keep attacking them. Yeah, that's going to help. That's going to do a lot. The best thing that I think could happen in places like Pennsylvania is if all the people got together, right and left, instead of buying into this stuff and fighting it out between each other, got together and said, look, we are the people, and tell the governor, we're having all this unrest and all these protests. You're responsible. You fix it. If you agree with me, or if any of what I said makes sense, then try to be part of the solution. Try to make things better. Don't feed into it, regardless, right, left, whatever side of this issue we're on. Treat people with kindness and respect. All right, I pray. Government's not going to take care of me. If you didn't learn that through this, you didn't learn anything. Government is not going to take care of you. Nobody's taking care of you or your family. You have to do it. The only person looking out for you is God. You got yourself, you have your family, you have God. And people say, there's a lot of yeah, buts when you say, well, I trust in God. Well, yeah, but don't you have to go to work and earn money? Yeah, but don't you? Well, you're right. The yeah, buts are where you need to be self-sufficient. You need to take responsibility for your own life. Self-sufficiency is not anti-God. It's an acknowledgement that in this world, nobody's looking out for you. Nobody's going to take care of you or your family. You've got to do that. The only person who is looking out for you and take care of you is God. And he's going to work through all your struggles and all your challenges and all your successes and issues to try and build you up to something better. Thanks for watching. Give me a like, subscribe, and I'll talk to you again soon. God bless.